Good evening, everybody. Muy buenas noches a todos. My name is Faris Sabah, the County Superintendent of Schools, and it is my pleasure to welcome you tonight to our annual report. And me da muchísimo gusto darles la bienvenida para esta noche para una presentación de nuestro reporte anual. We're going to talk a little bit, just going to give you some information about our evening tonight and what we're going to be covering. And then we're going to jump right in because we have a lot to share with you and we're very excited to have you here. Voy a compartir un poco de información sobre lo que vamos a estar hablando y después vamos a comenzar porque tenemos mucho que compartir con ustedes. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. First, we'd like to share with folks who would like to hear this presentation in Spanish, how to change the language. Me gustaría informar a los que quieren escuchar esta presentación en español cómo pueden cambiar el idioma. En la parte de abajo de la página usted hay un icono que es un globo. Pueden apretar ese icono y cambiar el idioma al español. Y así pueden escuchar la presentación al español. Tenemos a Jessica Castañeda que está aquí para ayudarnos con interpretación. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos, Jessica. And we'd also like to share with you that we would like to allow folks to ask questions and so we can provide answers. And the way we're going to be doing that is through the question and answer feature. And so if you have any questions that you'd like answered, please go ahead and you'll see the question and answer in the bottom of your screen. And so we'll ask everybody to ask your questions there. We also are using the chat feature tonight. And so if you would like to, you may hear us asking you to put something in the chat. Like I'm going to ask you right now to please put your name. And if you're a parent, if you work for this, one of the school districts, what role you play, if you're a board member, if you're a community member, please share with us your name and what your role is and what organization you're with. We would love to have that in the chat. And so that way we could get to know you a little bit. Les voy a pedir a todos que pongan su nombre y su información en el chat para que les conozcamos un poquito más. So please go ahead and do that at this point. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of things, and traditionally the annual report has been a document, like a magazine that we put out, and we thought we wanted to do things differently just because this has been such a different year for all of us, for our students, our families, and our staff, and we wanted it to be a little bit more. We wanted to mix it up a little bit, and we wanted to make sure that the student voices were an important part of the presentation tonight. And so you're going to be, we're going to be infusing a lot of those voices into today's presentation. Our theme is equity and resilience, and you're going to hear that theme resonate in multiple areas, because we feel like the challenges that we face really brought out our focus on equity and the amazing resilience of our community, our students and our parents and our staff. We're going to talk about some of the challenges we face this year. We're going to have a wonderful keynote from Wendy Barron, who's going to be talking to us about how to go from adversity to resilience. And we're going to talk about some of the areas that some of the challenges we face and some of the ways that we adapted and provided services to our community in the areas of health and safety, connectivity and access to technology, in the areas of academics, social emotional learning, and in the area of racial justice. And we have a student speaker, Carmen Asimitia, who's going to be speaking to us at the latter part of our presentation. And you do not want to miss Carmen's speaking with us. She's an amazing young woman who has a lot to share about her experience through this pandemic and beyond. And then we're going to be talking about looking to the future, what to expect and where we're headed as a school system, and how we're going to continue learning. And if we have time, we're going to be focusing on Q&A and be able to talk a little bit with you about that. But again, please, if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the question and answer, the Q&A icon that you have on your screen. I don't have to tell you how challenging it has been for us over the last 15 months. The governor declared a state of emergency for us because of the COVID pandemic in March of 2020. And it has been a nonstop roller coaster ride for everybody involved in our community. It was not clear to us the extent of the danger and of the length of the crisis. We kept on thinking it was going to be over any moment. We didn't realize how serious it was. until we started seeing the deep impacts it was having both nationally, internationally, and here locally. And it wasn't the only challenges that we faced. We faced fires, an awakening in our country when it comes to the movement for racial justice. And those areas, COVID-19, fires, and this movement for racial justice really framed so much of our decisions and our work this year. And everything that I'll be sharing with you tonight is not just the work of one organization or of the County Office of Education only. This is as a result of the partnership with 10 amazing superintendents that I get to work with on a weekly basis, charter leaders, private school leaders, community healthcare providers, amazing teachers, school nurses, administrators, and so many partners that we work with. And this journey that we want to share a little bit of what we've learned. And we know this is just the beginning because we've only been able to collect a bit of the data that we need to understand the depth of impact and also of the different efforts and strategies that we implemented this year. When we started this journey in March of last year, we did a variety of different things, from hiring, from providing training to teachers to pivot quickly to distance learning. We created safety protocols. We helped teachers with their with distance learning and implementation. We developed countywide mental health services, working closely with public health. We developed surveillance testing systems. We created a variety of trainings for our staff, worked together with all our districts to be able to provide and increase services when it comes to food services and other kinds of basic needs for them. And this continued until we also began with providing more information about vaccination when that started in February of this year, and continued partnering with pediatricians, with different service providers to be able to vaccinate our staff, to be able to work towards the reopening of our schools, which started in March and has continued up until the end of the school year. We were just able to finish our graduations recently. And when we look back, which is what we're doing today, and we look at all the different pieces the steps that were taken to try to address the challenges that we were facing, and the amazing resilience that our students showed through this whole process, we recognize that this has been such a inspiring experience for all of us, and painful, of course, but inspiring us to continue our commitment for equity. Now, before the pandemic, the County Office of Education had developed a new strategic plan. It was a 5-year plan, or it is a 5-year plan, with 2 areas of focus that I'd like to point out that were key for us in our response to the pandemic this year. And the first, of course, is the very heart of our plan, which is all about equity. We constantly asking the question, does your zip code, does your race, does your ethnicity, does your gender, does your sexual orientation, does that, or any other protected classification, does that influence your likelihood of success? And if the answer is yes, then we have not done our job as a system to be able to protect, support, inspire, and provide the opportunities for our community. And that equity mindset, that equity lens that we use, is something that is so important, because what happened with this pandemic is that it brought out stronger and more intensely than ever these inequities that exist. And we recognize that it was our job as educators, as part of the systems of support that exist in our community, to be able to dismantle those inequitable practices and be able to ensure that everybody's getting access and opportunities to meet their needs. The other area I'd like to share with you that was a part of our focus, where it was this area of our priorities. And at the top of our priority list is safety, engagement, and social emotional wellness. And at the same level as academic achievement and college and career readiness, and at the same level as sustainability. This idea that we as an educational system must be committed to ensure the safety of our students, ensure that they are engaged in their education and in the schools, and that we are protecting the social emotional well-being of our students. That concept of our seeing that as a fundamental part of who we are as educators, I think it's helped us to focus our efforts not only about helping our students with distance learning and academic achievement. Those are extremely important, and that was an important part of this, but also looking about the social emotional well-being of our students, because we recognize early on how impacted our students were with isolation, with anxiety, with depression, suicidal ideation. We recognized that an important part of our role had to be to prepare them, to help them through this difficult time. And that was an important commitment that we made as a school system, as a county office of education, working in partnership with all our community to provide that support. And so I'd like to, I'm going to turn the conversation over to somebody who is really a person who has worked in education all her life, somebody who has been part of the New Teacher Center and has been a lead in the New Teacher Center, and somebody who we brought in as an expert to help us with the development of social emotional learning solutions for our school community. And recognizing how important this component was and how we needed to be able to connect with and work with all the folks that were interfacing with our students and our parents. We knew that we needed to bring in Wendy Barron, who's somebody who is really many of you probably know her and have had a chance to work with her if you work in the school system. She is somebody who's really inspiring in her leadership and in her knowledge. And I'd like to introduce you to Wendy Barron, who's going to be talking to us about some of the things that we put in place, some of the efforts, the strategies that we put in place to address the challenges that our students are facing. Wendy, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very delighted to be here. And let's go ahead and move forward on these slides a little bit. So this is a little bit about me, as you just heard. And my whole career has been in Santa Cruz. So it's been very, very powerful, and I feel honored to be part of this year's solutions that we've been employing. And the topic that I'm going to speak on is from adversity to resilience. So I'd like you to think back to March of 2020, and let's go back one for a second, from March of 2020. And okay, we just heard about the pandemic. We just got notification that everything is closed down. We just learned that we are going to be doing distance learning. And I'd like you to just put in the chat, and this chat, a reminder, it's going to say to panelists and attendees, how were you feeling right about that time around March 15th, 16th, that early time in March? So go ahead and just put in the chat, how are you feeling? Let's take a look. Frightened. Thank you, Rose. Yeah, worried, anxious, uncertain, scared, overwhelmed, concerned, surreal. I can relate. Uncertain, confused, worried, anxious. All right. So these are just a few of the feelings that we all were having in Santa Cruz. Exactly. Fearful, shocked, worried. So let's take a look at how educators across the U.S. were feeling right about that time. So this is in March of 2020, and this was a webinar that Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence convened right at the beginning, and they surveyed over 5,000 educators, and you can see anxiety was the #1 emotion that we were feeling. Fear, stress, worry, that uncertainty, frustrated, overwhelmed, confused, sad, a little bit of hope, a little bit of scared and anger, but there were a lot of feelings going on. So we might not be that concerned. Okay, educators are feeling that way, but let's take a look for a moment about how we're regulating with all these worries and anxiety and fear. Yeah, we were not regulating very well. Some of us were, but you can see maybe you were experiencing some of these ways of coping with this immediate change that none of us were prepared for. So again, we might think, well, so what? As educators, we were feeling this way, but it's all about the students. So that's the most important part. Well, let's look for just a moment at the connection between how educators are feeling, what we're experiencing, and our support for students. So on the next slide, we see the research. Oh yes, so the research, hands down, is that teacher stress really impacts our students. So we see fewer gains in students' executive functions, and those executive functions are our ability to think flexibly, solve problems, regulate our emotions, be able to communicate sensibly and effectively. And actually, even our working memory can be affected when we're stressed, and our processing of new information. You found yourself having difficulty processing what to do right at that time, well, you were not alone. And that led to a lot of burnout because we had cortisol and adrenaline just coursing through our system. So let's go back one more for just a second. Thank you. So that was really causing some burnout in teachers, and that really impacted our own well-being. So when teachers have high levels of well-being, well, you can see that we're using our instructional time more effectively, greater student engagement. We can really be present with our students. We can think flexibly. We can communicate effectively. We can prioritize and organize and manage our time. So the biggest need right from the beginning was to make sure that educators develop some resilience. Well, again, we know a lot from the research. So next slide, please. So we know from the resiliency literature and research that caring relationships help us be more resilient. You've probably heard this with students, one caring adult matters. And so resilience enables us to bounce back, to be flexible and adaptable. And so the protective factors that help us to transform adversity and develop resilience, it's those caring relationships. And caring relationships that convey compassion, understanding of how the other is feeling, respect for the other, no matter what is going on, how somebody is feeling, what they're thinking, what they're doing. And it's grounded in listening, that deep listening that requires us to be present and curious. And then there's that safety and basic trust that we have in those relationships. So that was number one of what we needed to do, was to foster resilience through caring relationships among the adults and with the students. So to the next slide, please. Thank you. Well, in 2018, in the spring, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and New Teacher Center embarked on a research survey. We were studying well-being and resilience right then. And we surveyed over 5,000 educators, and what we learned, definitely for the adults, that the supportive relationships not only help our executive functions, but they help our overall well-being, our health, our immune systems, our just basic physical well-being. And you can see teachers that are feeling resilient, they're feeling greater inspiration. They're going to stay in teaching, and less burnout, less emotional exhaustion. So again, that became our core of what we needed to do immediately. And ongoingly, right? Because we also not only had COVID-19, we had the fires in the fall. That just added another layer to our ability to be resilient and recover from all these stresses. So one more, thank you. Next one. So we had some key learnings that we brought right into the county office immediately and into districts. And that first one was self-care for the adults. That is not a luxury. That is just a necessity. And these cultures of belonging where relationships are caring and supportive and trust is cultivated, that was a critical component, not just for us as individuals, not just for schools and districts, but also for our whole community, because we wanted to foster resilient communities. And then as educators, we really needed to understand, well, what are trauma-informed, sensitive practices that we can employ for ourselves, for our students, our families, and our community organizations? Because we wanted our organizations, our schools to be healing centered so we could thrive and flourish. And so one of the things that we all started doing, and you're going to hear more about this throughout this whole presentation, this town hall, is that these wellness practices and social emotional learning that included being aware of how we're feeling, being able to have some strategies to regulate, being able to communicate respectfully with others, be able to communicate our feelings, express those to one another, be aware of others, and then make responsible decisions. That became critical. And so all of these fostered our own mental and physical well-being, and we're leading our students to greater academic success. Now, I'm just going to close this with a quote from James Baldwin, and that is just for us to remember: the moment we cease to hold each other, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. So I know the county office and the district really took to heart what we were learning right away. And so this next section, we're going to be looking at how the Santa Cruz County Office of Education responded. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and thank you for your leadership and your expertise that you help bring to our county. You know, when I think about what we have experienced as a community, trauma is the word that I think resonates with everything that our youth have, our children and youth have gone through, and our families, and of course our staff. And I think having this trauma-informed approach to every aspect of what we do is necessary for us to continue to help our community heal. And Wendy has been such an amazing leader in helping us with this, with these services, and we're so grateful for everything that you helped us with. As we move forward, talking about some of the responses, I'd like to focus just a little bit on as an example of how our schools and the County Office of Education focus on social emotional learning and student wellness in under that frame of looking at equity, right? And one was creating these communities of practice, which is really bringing people together to talk about solutions, to address the problems and talk about solutions. We formed a wellness committee at the County Office of Education. We also formed an equity community of practice in collaboration with Cabrillo College, and also formed a student leadership and engagement group. Our idea was to create networks of support to address the social emotional well-being of our community. We also provided professional development and resources for our educators through leadership summits, through distance learning boot camps, trauma-informed practices, and also developing a webpage, which we'll give you a link for in just a moment. We provided supports for families, such as family nights in the arts, math, science, literacy, and other STEM areas, and expanded services and staffing to provide social emotional supports, mental health supports, counselors, intervention specialists, social workers, community partnerships, and support wellness. We're going to be talking a little bit more about this, but I wanted to highlight these pieces just because I think it's important to see how we linked the needs that we identified to the services that we are able to offer in partnership with a variety of different folks, many partners that came together to be able to make to transform our school system to provide wraparound services to our community, even when we weren't able to see them directly one-on-one in many cases. So I'd like to highlight one of the the positives that some of the positives that came out of this very difficult time. And one is an alignment with our 10 school districts and our charter schools, our private schools, and our early learning community. As we transitioned to distant learning together, we really had to support each other to figure out how to do this best, especially with the short time frame that we had to be able to keep our schools open, but in a very different way. We developed resources together. We offered a similar professional development. We met. I met twice a week with the district superintendents, once a week with some of the charter schools and the private schools and the early learning community. We developed weekly communications together, and we did this work. One, recognizing the importance of supporting each other, learning together, and be able to come up with solutions together to try to create as much consistency and collaboration. And I think that the link between us and after this challenging year is stronger than ever. And it's been such an inspiration to be able to work with these amazing leaders in the education community this year. And the partnerships weren't only in the school system. We also partnered with the healthcare providers, pediatricians, with Dominican Hospital, Dignity, Salud para la Gente, Santa Cruz Health Centers, of course, public health. We worked with Safeway and Rite Aid. We also worked with tech access partners such as Santa Cruz Community Foundation, who helped us in this area and many other areas, Cruz.io, Santa Cruz Works, and many government agencies at the city, county levels, and of course, fire and law enforcement, and a variety of other partners that we got to work with, like Salud para la Gente and Santa Cruz Health Centers, just a whole family, a whole community coming together to support each other. Some of the things that we began working on were really at kind of general levels, like the human resources systems. We developed safety protocols, began working with our unions from the very beginning, our classified and teachers unions, looking at how we can transform our hiring practices and our support training practices to be able to ensure that everybody had the information they needed, that we had the staff that we needed. We connected with we volunteered, we provided volunteers to a lot of the public health effort that was taking place. We provided trainings in COVID-19 and safety protocols. We worked on getting vaccinations for staff, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that in just a moment, but really supporting the human resources of all of the school districts and the charter schools to be able to and private schools in some cases, to provide support to be able to make the adjustments that we needed to make. An important role in the County Office of Education is providing support to the school districts when it comes to sustainability and managing of district funding. And the County Office of Education provides a lot of supports in how to, when the funding is received by us, and also how it's spent and how it's reviewed, ensuring that the districts are solvent. And this year, our business office also helped with the procurement of personal protective equipment to make sure that all our staff had the equipment that they needed to be safe. We also helped in provided support in a lot of the funding that we received. That you heard about the CARES Act. You heard about a lot of the ARP, the American Rescue Plan. A lot of funding has come into Santa Cruz County. Actually, $167 million has been received by our schools over the last 15 months, specifically to address the challenges that we're facing. And this is both from state and federal sources. And so here's a list of different funding sources. And part of our role was to support districts in being able to prepare to spend this money within the time frame that was provided, to ensure that we're complying with all the requirements and making sure that it's being directed, of course, for the needs of our students in our community. And we are fortunate to be able to get this one-time money, and it's important to note that it is one time, but this one-time funding to be able to do a lot of the changes, the environmental changes, the equipment, the training, the staffing that we need to continue to address the needs of our students in our community. And the business office here at the County Office of Education did an outstanding job in providing those supports to our school districts as we move forward. I did want to point out that because this is one-time money, It is great that we have that right now, but we have to remember that this money is going to get spent and then we're not going to have it. And so a lot of the things that we're putting in place, such as behavioral health services, and other kinds of services that our students need. Once that money is expired, we're not going to have money unless the state provides us additional funding on an ongoing basis. We're not going to be able to continue with those services. And that's something that we worry about for the long term. So what we're going to be talking about right now is just a few of the areas that we focus our efforts at the County Office of Education over the last last 15 months. One is in guidance and safety. Another area is digital access. Another area is academics, social emotional health, and the racial justice movement. And I'm going to ask you a question that I'd like you to put in the chat. And I want you to make sure when you put it in the chat, where right above where you type the information, you want it to say all panelists and attendees, just to make sure that everybody gets to hear what you say. But what is the greatest areas of concern for our students that you have? If you were to think about what are the kinds of things that you worry about when we talk about the needs of our students and how they were impacted by COVID-19 and the fires, what are those areas? What are the things that you most worry about when you think about your own children, when you think about our students in the community? What are those areas? And so please put that in the chat. And I'm gonna say right away that for me it was the mental health, the behavioral health needs of our students. I was very, very concerned about the isolation, the things that Wendy talked about, and also of our staff, because the transition and the pressures that were under the school community were so heavy and so strong. It was really something that we were very concerned about, and so providing that support was something that was really important. Another area for us that was really important is understanding all of the different guidance that we were getting from the state. And so when it came to health and safety guidance, it was very important for us to act as a liaison to the public health office on behalf of all the schools in the county, to provide interpretation to the guidance that was coming down, because we were getting a lot of different guidance from a variety of different sources, and that guidance was often confusing and contradictory. We also looked at preparing our schools for protocols, and we helped provide reviews of the schools. And so when we talked about keeping 6 foot distancing, well, what does a lunch line look like if you're keeping 6 foot distancing? Well, what does your front office need to look like if you're having to keep 6 foot distancing, for example? And so working to put together protocols to support the schools was something that was really, really important. As I mentioned earlier, helping with personal protective equipment, we warehoused that equipment that was coming in from the state and made it accessible to everybody, from face coverings to clothing, gloves, disinfecting solutions, all kinds of products that were necessary to make sure that we were keeping a safe and healthy environment. And then one of the biggest areas was to help with positive cases. We fortunately didn't have a lot of in-school transmission cases in the county, but we had a lot of positive cases that mostly students or staff were coming to the school and then testing positive for COVID-19. And there was a set of protocols, such as isolating people who were sick, quarantining people who were exposed, and that has taken and continues to take a significant amount of effort to be able to coordinate that with public health and be able to provide the information that our parents and our students need on an ongoing basis. And then, of course, answering questions and responding to concerns. This health-based concerns bring out a lot of concerns and anxiety for everybody involved. And so there's often a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty that we already talked about that people want to hear as much as possible what it is that we're doing to be able to ensure that we're keeping everybody safe and healthy. And being able to answer those questions and try to provide feedback in a timely fashion was a commitment we made. When I look at some of the things that you've talked, many of you have commented about the things that you were thinking about. Marina mentions a sense of belonging and maintaining a community. Kelly McQuaid, providing children a framework for interpreting the traumas they experience and the tools to learn resiliency skills. Outstanding. Shalak mentioned the social, emotional, behavioral, and physical health of our youth. Sandra Nichols, social isolation, not being able to play with friends, pressure with parents. Ana Ibarra, the mental health of children under 10 years of age. And then not being informed and had trouble expressing their feelings. So outstanding. So a lot of focus from you as I did as well on the social emotional aspect of impact that this was having on our students. Another area that we focused on as part of our health focus was on surveillance testing. And we developed a surveillance testing and helped to test in collaboration with all the school districts and our charter schools and our private schools, over 13,000 tests. We work with Stanford Medical and then Valencia Labs and the Color System. And that allowed us to continue to make sure that we were doing everything that we can to support our community and make sure that they were not positive with COVID-19. One of the biggest efforts that we undertook was the vaccination of our school community. We were the first county in the Bay Area to vaccinate or offer vaccination to all members of the K-12 community. And we partnered also with the early childhood education community to vaccinate them, as well as the community college, Cabrillo College. We partnered with Dignity Health, Dominican Hospital, with Safeway, Rite Aid, to be able to, and of course our public health partners, to be able to help with the vaccine effort. And we're able to offer vaccination to our entire K-12 community by the first week of March, weeks earlier than many counties were able to do so, thanks to this amazing work by our partners. And we helped with the vaccination effort of about 8 to 10% of the population in Santa Cruz County, and about 40% of our student population in Santa Cruz County we were a part of that vaccination effort. And so, as you know, we're now focusing on 12 to 18-year-olds. And hoping that at some point soon, students younger than 12 will also be authorized for vaccination, so we can support that effort as well. And now, one of the areas that I'd like to switch gears for is to talk about digital access. And when we switched over to distance learning for a lot of our students, two kinds of connectivity became fundamentally important for our students. One is being able to access their learning, and two, access to a variety of resources that were available in the community. And we became painfully aware that many of our families and many of our students did not have internet connectivity and were not able to access the resources they needed. I'd like to introduce Jason Borgen, who's our Chief Technology Officer here at the County Office of Education, who led the effort to us at the County Office of Education in collaboration with our partners in the schools and with the Community Foundation and a variety of other partners to be able to reduce this digital divide. Jason?
Hey, good evening. Thank you, Ferris. So back last March, we found out that a lot of students, as you well know, the need for connectivity was at the foundation of providing access and curricular materials for academics. And so at the very early start, we also found that Chromebooks and devices were on back order, very hard to procure. So reaching out to all of our partners and vendors out in the educational technology community, we communicated the needs both out to the parents as well as to our schools and our districts. And so you saw kind of step one is the communication efforts. Not only do we reach out and engaged our local districts in where the needs were around technology, both internet devices, hotspots, as well as Chromebooks or end user devices for students to utilize at home. And then what we did is actually created a map location of all free hotspot locations across the county. So if students didn't have internet access at home, they couldn't procure a hotspot yet, they're able to access and drive up to these locations or walk up to these locations across the county. You can see many hotspot locations. We also color coded and partnered with Cruzeo Internet Services. We realized that some of the big telecom companies, Comcast, Spectrum, Charter Spectrum, offered internet, but it was a very, very cumbersome process. So we worked directly with Cruzeo, partnered with them to create a streamlined process to get free internet access to those families in need. So Cruzeo created a simple form where we then verify their eligibility, and Cruzeo would go out and connect those households. Cruzeo also reached out to many local districts and created parking lot Wi-Fi zones, and those are all the blue areas you see in the map. So Cruzio actually did this with some support from the Community Foundation and in-kind support through the needs of our community. So that was kind of big, and that actually launched the Equal Access Santa Cruz program Cruzio has presently. The Equal Access Santa Cruz program provides any families who are of low income, low cost internet services at $10 a month. And finally, we want to continue these efforts. We know the need for internet connectivity and broadband continues. And so we wanted to build out an advisory. And so right now, working closely with some superintendents, we did so and had several meetings with folks over the Hill and folks, the Monterey Bay Broadband Consortium as well, engage in how to truly build out a everyone connectivity campaign. And so we're continuing to have those conversations and working with federal monies to build out and ensure every single student or family has connectivity to the internet. And next slide, please, Ferris. And so you can kind of see our impact. Back last March, we estimate about 18% of our community had no internet connectivity at home. And after deploying about 5,000 hotspots across our community, that dropped close to 6,000 students. So now, right now, our estimate is only about 3% of our entire student body in Santa Cruz County are without internet. And those are locations typically that are hard to reach, don't have an easy fiber line, don't have a cable line connection, cellular service may not be provided in those areas. And so we're continuing to explore other opportunities for these families. Satellite, we have conversations with Starlink, which does satellite internet services as well, to connect that last mile, if you will, of internet connectivity for our families. Next slide. And so one piece on this was also around the use of virtual meeting software like Zoom. And I thought this graphic was kind of really nice to hit home. Back last March, 99% of educators, we estimate, never actually used Zoom before or Google Meet as a platform to teach or engage students and or families. And now 100% use this platform. So that was a big shift and a big training opportunity for our staff at the COE and all across the district. So I commend all 10 school districts, as well as all of our student programs across Santa Cruz County Office of Education for embracing these efforts. And so with that, it was quite a year. And I just want to end with this quote here from a student. You can read it on your screen. I do want to highlight, I was very scared and upset at all the change. Although it wasn't the same, technology gave me an alternative that helped me stay balanced.
Jason, thank you so much for all your efforts. And I think that this is a great transition to the next phase, which is that the experience the students had with distance learning was very different for some students in comparison to others. And I'm a father of two students who proudly go to school at the Pajaro Valley Unified School District. And their experiences were very different. One student who felt very successful with distance learning and the transitions, and another student who was not as successful and had a much tougher time with this different modality of instruction. And so I'm going to invite Debbie Bodenheimer, who is our Associate Superintendent in charge of Educational Services and helped lead a lot of the efforts for professional development and also much of the data gathering for related to student achievement data, to talk to us a little bit about how students were impacted and how there was what the data tells us about the impacts of the pandemic on our community. Welcome, Debbie.
All right, thank you, Ferris. If you would like to advance the slide, we are going to be talking about the academic data. I know there has been a huge amount of concern about how students did academically during the pandemic. And we have kind of a mixed bag of data that we'd like to share with you. And also just really talk about the responses that our districts and our county office did to respond to this data. And I have to say, I'm really proud of how everyone responded so quickly and with so much urgency to make sure that we were keeping our students academically engaged in school, even during this tumultuous time. So
Debbie,
just
could I
yeah,
interrupt you before you
please do.
continue? Because I do want to ask our attendees a question, which is that when you look at data, what data would you be interested in looking at as we are looking at the impacts of COVID-19 on our community? And we're going to be sharing some of the data we have collected, and Debbie's going to be sharing that in just a moment. But if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat that what data would you be interested in seeing? And we may not be able to have that. We may not have it. We may have it today, but definitely I'm interested in knowing what your interest level is. What kind of data should we be looking at? And Debbie, why don't you start us off with the enrollment in our schools?
Great. Thank you, Ferris. And good question. Thank you for sharing that, because I know that we are trying to gather data. It's been rather challenging this year. So the more that we know about what your needs are and what you'd like to hear about, the more we can work on that data gathering. So the first data, we did have some student enrollment declines across the county. And this definitely was an effect of COVID-19. If you can hit the next, Ferris. So we had a 2% decline in student enrollment across the county in 2021. And then next slide. We also had a decline in kindergarten enrollment. And this was something that was consistent across the state, a 12% decline in kindergarten enrollment. And there is definitely some concern about how we are going to make up for this when students come back to school next year, having missed out a year of kindergarten. So that is one of the data points that we are really focused on. Next slide, please. So as far as student engagement, as we mentioned, the enrollment dropped. We definitely had students who went to private schools that stayed open during the time. And kinder and first grade suffered from low enrollment. And this is very consistent across the state. So we are using this data to really respond and focus on our reopening and creating more full day and safe practices. During the pandemic, even when it wasn't safe to open up for everyone, we had small in-person cohorts, we increased tutoring services, we increased digital access, we created independent study programs. And right now we are in the process of really doing a lot of outreach to families to ensure that we can increase our enrollment for 21-22, now that all districts plan to be back in person full-time in the 21-22 school year. And the interesting piece about attendance was that a lot of districts actually reported increases in attendance due to online instruction format. And so we are also looking at continuing with online instruction where it's possible for those students that it really worked for them academically and socially. So next slide, please. So we worked hard this year to really look at our academic data and try to determine how students did this year as compared to in the past. We definitely heard from our schools that there was a higher rate of D's and F's in 2021 at our middle and high schools, although some districts also had higher A's and D's and F's. And so there was this kind of interesting U-shaped curve that districts had, which showed that some students really did thrive during COVID-19 and distance learning, and then many students, unfortunately, really struggled. There was also a noted drop in GPA for students in 2021, and we are looking at graduation data, and we are still collecting that, and we will report out on that to compare how 2021 graduation data was with the past. The other interesting part about our academic data is that standardized testing was put on hold. And so typically we really rely on having that standardized testing data that gives us that end of the year summative information that we can use to plan for the next year. Unfortunately, the CASP test, which is the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, was suspended in the spring of 2020. So there was no standardized testing in the spring of 2020. It was reinstated in the spring of 2021. However, districts were given a lot of flexibility, which was great, but it will make it more challenging to really get all of that data into some kind of a system where we can analyze it across all of the districts. So districts use the CASP or their own assessment system, and we will get more information in the winter of 2021 for English language arts and math. We will not have science data until 2022 because the science test was optional. But the bright spot is that we are getting more data in for our English learners, and we're getting more completion rates than we did have in 2019, 2020. And so we're using that data, of course, to guide us with our support for our EL students. So I'd like to take a break from talking about data and share a very amazing original song from a student at Pacific Collegiate School. And it's Abigail Goodman. And it really just describes how she was feeling during the pandemic, and especially at the beginning of the pandemic. And as our theme is about resilience and overcoming, it's really powerful to see this. And then at the end of our presentation, we'll hear about how students really overcame and were able to see the light at the end of the tunnel again. So Ferris, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and showing this, and please enjoy.
Oh, if I'm not laughing at your jokes, it doesn't mean I don't think they're funny. I've just got a lot in my mind, and I don't think I really am fine. I've got a lot I don't know how to say, and I really don't think I'm okay. And if I'm not at your door, it's not because I don't like you. And if I don't pick up the phone, it's not because I don't want to talk to you. I've just got a lot on my mind, and I don't think I really am fine. I've got a lot I don't know how to say, and I really don't think I'm okay. I used to know what I wanted, but now I don't even know what I need. Things used to be so simple, but now I don't even know what simplicity is. I've just got a lot on my mind, and I don't think I really am fine. I've got a lot I don't know how to say, and I really don't think I'm okay. I really don't think I'm okay.
So I hope you enjoyed that amazing, powerful song. It kind of makes me cry every time I watch it. But it also shows that our students were figuring out ways to express themselves and determining ways that even though they weren't always feeling okay, what can they do to move on? And I know later in our presentation, Dr. Michael Painter will be talking more about the social emotional health and wellness that we've been really working on as a county to support our kids and their emotional health. So next slide, please. So this is really just some quick responses to the academic data. And I know our districts have really worked so incredibly hard to make sure to support students academically. We've been looking at our grading practices, and we created a grading for equity committee. And we're looking at all kinds of support programs, and districts implemented tutoring programs. They increased credit recovery for high school. They created internet hubs of support. And as I think I mentioned earlier, small cohorts were brought back to campus for additional support even before full reopening to make sure that those students who really needed it were getting what they needed. We have professional development for our English learners. We also had other professional development through the Teacher Leadership Institute to support science and environmental literacy. And this summer, there are more summer school programs than ever, with longer duration and more options and grade levels. And so the districts have really taken advantage of their funding opportunities to implement very robust summer school programs. So next slide, please. In addition, the Educational Services Division, we really worked hard on professional development. We hired a full-time teacher on special assignment to support distance learning, and she will continue with us for next year as a coach for technology and innovation. We've expanded just 1 million professional development opportunities for distance learning and hybrid. We've brought people together to collaborate in our hybrid think tank. And we've also continued to work with Les Forrester and our Inside Education group to virtually offer members of the community insight into our local public education system and to really respond to their needs and to get their feedback from the community. Next slide, please. So this was just another piece of student artwork that I'd like to share, or another student voice. The Scotts Valley High School art department, they put together this a slide deck, and this was one of the slides that really reached out to me. Again, how students were feeling about the pandemic and their frustration. And so they were able to take it out and express themselves through music and through art and through other things. And our teachers and our community were very responsive to ensuring that students were able to express themselves. Next slide, please. So a little bit more academic data on student events. As you can see, the science fair numbers dropped dramatically in 2021, and our virtual math festival also dropped dramatically. However, there's a positive trend with our visual and performing arts events. Our Poetry Out Loud actually increased, and the Arts Exhibit Showcase that Audrey Sirota has been leading, students actually entered more artwork this year than they have in the past. And so there have been some bright spots as well. And next slide, please. And so responding to student events, and this is important for us because the student events are really a highlight of the work that we do at the COE. Our science coordinator is working really hard to think about different ways to reimagine the science fair. And she will think about creating a STEAM event to gather more participation that doesn't all have to be part of the competition. So keeping the science fair competition, but adding to that as well with science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. We're working with the Math Festival to continue to make this non-competitive. And the arts events, as I mentioned, really stayed strong during the pandemic. And that was really a bright spot. I think students were home, they had time, they had extreme support from their teachers, and they really were able to express themselves. And VAPA teachers came together in 3 different groups to work together every week. And there was an increase in PD as well for visual and performing arts. So there were some bright spots to the pandemic. A quick look at our alternative ed programs and also our career technical education partnership data. There was an increase in graduation rate and also attendance. However, the enrollment did decrease and career technical education classes decreased, and the student count also decreased. Next slide, please. So there was, of course, again, a response from our alt ed and our CTEP team. Everyone worked together to support and personalize and innovate to make sure that all students' needs were being met. As Jason mentioned earlier, there was a huge amount of work to do to focus on internet connected devices and hotspots. There was additional counseling needed, or counseling that was provided, and also food was provided, and any kind of support that students needed. There were a lot of collaboration with outside agencies and community partners. And we also collaborated, educational services also collaborated with alt ed and with CTEP to support professional development to reach out to students as well. And this collaboration will continue to next year. So wrapping up, it's, as you know, it's been a challenging year. There have been some bright spots, there have been some positives, and I think students now are feeling really good about coming back to school. And here's another quote, just talking about loving being back in person again and seeing teachers in person and just really being grateful to be back. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Sabah.
Thanks, Debbie. You know, one of the things that we recognized as we were gathering data for this report was just how much information we need to continue to gather, because a lot of the pieces that we rely on, such as the standardized tests and other kinds of measures, were put on hold as a result of the pandemic, and that impacted our ability to be able to collect that. And I think it reminds us that it's going to take a lot of time for us to gather both personal qualitative information as well as quantitative information to understand how students were impacted. And we recognize that that's something that's going to be an ongoing effort for us, and we're committed to being a hub for that data to be able to continue to understand the needs of our students and the challenges that they face so that we can best provide them with services. I'd like to bring the focus back on social emotional wellness. And we are fortunate to have an administrator at the County Office of Education who's also a licensed therapist, Dr. Michael Painter, who has helped us coordinate a lot of the efforts across the county. A lot of the work that took place in support of our families was so important, life-saving, in fact. And we've worked with so many partners that you're going to be hearing about. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Painter to join us and talk to us about the kinds of trends that we've seen both nationally and locally, as well as the effort to provide support for our students and to our families. Dr. Painter?
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Sabah. And I know we've been sitting here for an hour, and I have been trained all year by Wendy Barron in social emotional learning and the 3 signature practices. And so I want to invite myself mostly for a little bit of anxiety, but for everybody else for the hour of sitting to take one deep breath. And just let it out. And that helps me, and I hope it helps you. And I appreciate you just pausing. And I did recognize a lot of names in the chat as we introduced ourselves when the evening began. And so, but those of you who don't know me, and as Ferris mentioned, I am the Director of Student Support Services. But I have worked at this juncture of mental health and education for the past 2 decades. And as very eloquently already spoken, you know, this past year has been exceptional at this juncture. I think as it has in many parts of our daily lives. And one silver lining I think I want to say by, you know, just start by saying is that I think this has infused this topic to be at the top of importance. And I noticed when Ferris asked you to put in your inputs about the concerns for the last year, 80–90% of you put in their social emotional issues. And so my personal professional hope is that this doesn't pass, that the pandemic does, but that our concern and our elevation of this topic stays equal to academic pursuits. And as mentioned in our strategic plan. So Ferris, let's go ahead and start with national data. I start with this one because I think it puts us in a context across the US, and also because, like other data that was mentioned this evening, we're just getting preliminary information. And I am going to share some CHICS data, which I'll explain. And I noticed Amity was very curious about that. So to start, nationally, what we're seeing across the US is that there's been an increase in ER visits, or as they call it, emergency department visits. And these really have jumped up between a 4th and a 3rd, depending on the age group that you see there. And similarly, mental health insurance claims have doubled for teens seeking mental health services. And then a little subpopulation that we often focus on is the LGBTQ plus community. And nationally, again, we have some local stuff too, but nationally, a super majority, over 80%, right, attempted high stress, and up to 10 to 20% considered suicide. So these are concerning, alarming, and I think everybody has already spoken to this being an area of focus. And so we'll go ahead and look at some of the local data now, Ferris. We did just, as a county, almost all districts participated in the California Healthy Kids Survey. And this is a survey that's given every 2 years to odd numbered grades 5, 7, 9, and 11. And what I did is I just looked at the initial incoming reports and only at secondary. So what I've listed here is that there has been an increase in, again, a portion of the districts already reporting in an increase, what I call sadness, hopelessness, depression indicator. And basically what they do is they ask you during the past 12 months, did you ever feel sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more? And that stopped you from doing some usual activities. And for those in the therapeutic world, they know that that is a depression indicator for stopping something you normally enjoy for 2 weeks or more. That saw a 15% jump, which is quite large. I looked over the past four cohorts, which is 8 years, and nothing rose that much in 1 year. And so to me, that was the biggest standout. Separately, perhaps good news initially, but bad news overall is that there was a steady suicidal ideation. And that really was, did you consider seriously thinking of taking your own life? And that stayed at about 12 to 20%. And that range is sort of, I'd say your average comprehensive secondary student on the one hand to 20% being, if you disaggregate, sometimes by ethnicity, by LGBTQ plus, and sometimes there's another category called non-traditional, which is typically alternative education sites. And those also carry a higher rate of suicidal ideation. Last thing I want to mention on this slide is just that we also look to child welfare data to see as a proxy about trauma that our students might be experiencing through physical, emotional, sexual abuse. And what we saw was at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a steep drop of about 16% of reports going to CPS or the screening department. And of that 16%, 10% was for a lack of educators making those phone calls, because they can break it down by reporter type. I don't have the reporter type currently, but I just got the last 6 months of data up through April 30th. And what we saw was it sort of averaged out for 5 of those 6 months. And then in April, it shot up about 18%. And so I'm thinking there's a correlation there between returning to school and reporting happening, which also indicates more students that now we're aware of that have experienced trauma most likely. So I have one more slide, Ferris, on local data. This is more anecdotal, and I started with national data. We have some preliminary local data, but we are also getting a lot of anecdotal data, right? And so from County Behavioral Health directly, they saw a huge increase in mental health referrals and requests for services in May, just last month. And those typically are ones that are Medi-Cal eligible because they refer out, if you're not Medi-Cal eligible, back to your insurance agencies. And you saw those also saw a big increase earlier. Districts, some districts, I should say, give separate surveys to their students aside from California Healthy Kids surveys. And so we're starting to get some of that information in too. And one of our local districts gave a survey. This was about midpoint November 2020. And one of the questions they ask is how many students felt sad, annoyed, irritable, sensitive, right? And about 25 to 30% reported that. So this approaching a third. And they had a correlation between those same amount reported stress due to distance learning. And I think that actually correlates quite well to Wendy's slide that was the word cloud that showed their 5,000 educators across the country. What were they feeling? And I know I will admit to feeling some of those things for the last year for sure. Last but not least, I think this was mentioned lightly, but not as much as I thought it might be. And that is that attendance actually did not decline. In fact, I think it went up slightly. But there was a subcategory of students who were I call them very disengaged. It's probably not the technical term. But for those students, there was tremendous work done by the districts and alternative education, from social work visits, welfare checks, student attendance review boards. And what happened was, I think it was really a big split of most people were attended to and engaged, and a very small sliver was not, and they were very much disconnected, almost completely, it seemed like. Now let's do next slide, Ferris. So responses. This slide really talks about our initial responses right when we were there early March, April, and we, like all other things that were mentioned throughout this evening, partnered with other agencies. So Cradle to Career, Triple P, we created Zooms and family forums for communication and support. And then we in turn taught those skills or shared everything we learned in that process to other districts so they could continue within their own cohorts. We actually created a behavioral health resource directory, and I actually have that for you. I'm going to put it in the, let's see if that works. It's in the chat now. That was really just generated as an aggregation of really what's available in the mental health and substance use categories. And then it has some basic emergency needs and crisis services. And we did do a little bit of work, thank you, Encompass services, community services, about some specialized arranging immediate access as well. So there was some novel stuff that occurred in there as well. And we already shared with you the educator and family wellness pages from our distance learning websites. And so we can put those in again if you'd like them. And last but not least, on this slide, there were some very specialized requests. And one of those, for instance, came from the Diversity Center, and a great group of folks from behavioral health of the county, nonprofits, schools, COE, PVPSA, and Compass really rallied to bring together their sort of expertise and thought processes. And we're still supporting them to this day and meeting every couple of weeks to make sure that they're getting the support they need. All right, how about, let's see what, I think there's one more response slide, Ferris, and this one is a little bigger picture, and this kind of is a nice bookend to starting with Wendy Barron. As she noted already about our social emotional community of practice, I did want to add that this is a statewide grant, a federal grant, actually a FEMA grant called CalHOPE, and it's statewide to all 58 COEs, and we've had probably 2 to 5 dozen educators come every time. And right now, I know Wendy has, I think, on file 31 plans. And these plans are how they're going to integrate this curriculum, which has all been designed by the Wendy being part of the team, but also UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. And so we're very excited to have this all as a sort of go-to for the curriculum implementation. You know, and one thing we did, which I'll also mirror what Wendy said, we really started with the adults, the adult focus. And what I heard a lot, especially on her and seen in her burnout correlation to student success slide, you know, we felt like this, the adults need it for have feelings they're having. They also have to model and teach and embody this so that other students will be able to feel it and do the same. Similarly, real quick, we well, one more thing, sorry about, we did start an, we didn't start, we actually facilitated an online suicide prevention training. We also did help with the Calciana Youth Symposium as the education representative alongside with one of our local psychologists. And that brought Dr. Bruce Perry, who also, and some other speakers who also talked about the impact of trauma on students. And last but not least on this slide, I just want to say that I have the privilege of facilitating a student services directors group from all the larger districts in the county. And that has been a place where we both personally supported each other, but also brainstormed around these disengaged students, around mental health services, around social emotional learning and implementation and infusion into everything we do. So now let's finish up with a student quote here. And I'll let you read it, but you know, my hope here is that we, you know, they really did grasp the ubiquity of the pandemic and the effect on us. And I hope that we do bring an understanding to ourselves and to others. And I would even you know, conflate the word, if you will, with compassion. And or not conflate, but compare maybe. I'm missing a word, but I would use compassion and understanding in the same way. And I would hope that we do that in the next venture, whatever that looks like in our responses. So I'll hand it back to you, Dr. Sabah, and I think I'm right on time.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for sharing the amazing efforts that took our students. And you know, when I think about the partnerships and what we learned as well with these different efforts is that we can't forget that for all of these measures that we're looking at, whether we're looking at behavioral health, we're looking at access, we're looking at academic data, that equity component, that our students who are most impacted in all other measures, if based on your zip code, your socioeconomic status, based on your ethnicity or your race, those components, those kinds of characteristics impacted how difficult it was, how students experience a lot of the challenges that they face. And that doesn't mean that, that this was not a very difficult experience for almost everybody. But the fact is that on all the data that we have been seeing, and we'll be able to gather it more and more, we're seeing overrepresentation of students of color, overrepresentation of families from low socioeconomic backgrounds, folks who are African-American, students who are African-American or Latinx, more impacted in a variety of different ways. And so this reminds us about our responsibility to overcome these challenges and make sure that we are providing the services that we need to provide to our families, and dismantling these systems that are reinforcing the inequities that exist. And that is true in behavioral health as in the academic component and on our access to internet connectivity. I'd like to also discuss another area that I think was also transformative for us, and in a positive way, which is the movement for racial justice. And of course, that came from the tragedies of the killing of George Floyd, and of course the Black Lives Matters movement that have really brought us an awakening and an opportunity for us to embrace in our schools and our community. And this even during a pandemic, it was absolutely important for us as a school community to embrace this time, to be able to give our students a voice, to be able to tell us what they are experiencing, and why that generations and generations of oppression need to be addressed, and need to be addressed now, whether we're in a pandemic or not. And maybe especially because we're in a pandemic, and that pandemic is having those inequitable impacts on our families. And so as part of our responsibility as an education community, we did our best to be able to support our students and bring about those voices as a county office of education, and to be able to talk to to listen really to our community. We partnered with the NAACP to continue our work, which we had already been in place with African American Achievement Task Force, to look at what are the things that we need to put in place to support our African American students in Santa Cruz County. Our students represent about 1% of our student population, and yet we are seeing that they are experiencing some of the same challenges, and when it comes to the outcomes that we want to see for our families. And they bring our community of African American students bring such richness and to our schools, and we need to be able to ensure that they are given the same opportunities and success as their peers. We developed an initiative for racial equity and justice website that has a variety of resources, and this was also done in collaboration with NAACP and other leaders in the community. We continued our work for internal discussions to build an anti-racist organization in the County Office of Education among staff, our departments, our managers. We developed monthly and ongoing equity series presentations for the community. We worked with consultants and developed student task force to promote and created professional development opportunities for staff. And then we developed a racial equity and justice community of practice with Dr. Kofi Akindije from Cabrillo College, where participants, we had two groups, one group of students and a group of adults, but participants are working on action plans and finding solutions to the inequitable practices that exist in our community. We've also developed student leadership opportunities with Celeste Gutierrez and Amity Sandage and other leaders at the COE to create different leadership opportunities for students, different leadership councils of students who in a variety of different areas of focus. And this has really given us an opportunity to learn from students, to provide support for them, and also to help them think about how they want to take action, how they want to speak up and transform our schools and our community. We partnered with Shmuel Taylor, who worked on the 2020 Hindsight book, which was really it was a collection of photographs and stories of the different challenges faced in our community and the heroic steps that many took on behalf of the community, and developed curriculum and disseminated the book out to juniors across the county to be able to support their efforts in understanding how the tragedies that were faced by this community were faced and overcome. The big focus for us, of course, throughout this work has been the highlighting of student voices. And I think that if anything that we've learned is that we need to do more listening, more learning, and really engage our students in a variety of ways so that we can learn from them and help for them to lead us and show us the way. And we have gotten to know so many stories that throughout this year and beyond, and it's been really an inspiring aspect of the work that we're doing and will continue to be doing. And we're hoping to continue to offer those opportunities for students and that this partnership for both learning and action, which is, I think, what education is all about. I'd like to share some voices from our students who are part of our leadership groups. And when we ask them about what we need to be doing to make the changes necessary for our schools and for our community. And I would like to share a short video of some of their answers.
I'm here today with Azucena, and I am here. Hello, my name is Azucena, and I am here today with a group of students from Santa Cruz County to talk about racial equity and what we could do to make our schools a more equitable place, along with talking about the relationship with mentors to help students succeed. We have a list of questions, and our first question is, how do we ensure that our schools are safe places for all students regardless of their identity?
My name is Clea. I go by she, her. The way we can ensure that schools are like safe places despite people's identities would be like not making people feel like there's social barriers between one another. As we all know, there's different challenges we all face. I feel like school should be something that you look forward to going to, not to be like I'm being discriminated against because of how I look or how the way I act. I feel that as a teacher, you should ensure that the student feels safe and like make sure that you yourself are in check and be like, am I making the student feel safe? Am I treating the student fairly? Am I giving them all the same attention? I feel like that's one way we can start would be by school and in how teachers teach in classes.
And I think the best way to like make sure that students feel safe at school is just talk about issues that may seem like more uncomfortable to talk about, because I feel like they'll be more comfortable if you just talk about them more. Students will feel like they can talk to their teachers and they're more comfortable if you create like that safe space. Things don't seem taboo or like weird. And then I just feel like kids will feel more comfortable in their environment, and you should feel safe at school. So.
I think building a strong relationship with your students is also another good topic or a good thing, especially because if the kid has a good relationship with you, they'll feel safe enough to be able to come talk to you about certain issues. And also like holding other teachers accountable, because at least where I go to school, that doesn't happen. So then teachers get away with saying racist things and other like faculty members don't call them on that, especially if there's students coming forward saying this happened.
Yeah, my name is, I go by she, her, and I definitely agree with what Reyes was talking about. I feel like we need, in order to create a safe space, the teacher needs to acknowledge what they do and how they can make a person of color, any minority group, feel like they're not being heard and feel like they're isolated from the rest of the class, because the main authority figure that we look up to is not taking action and being held accountable.
So we are grateful to our students for,
Hello.
I'm going to pause this right
My
now
name is
before it starts up again. There we go. Grateful for our students for sharing their stories. And, I think that as I shared earlier, we are so excited about the leadership of our students, and we were hoping to continue to build on these these different student leadership councils into next year. We have a focus on environmental action and a focus on the arts, one on racial justice and equity, a focus on LGBTQ community issues, and I am forgetting one, and I can't think of it right now, but I'm sure it'll come to me in just a moment. And so, you know, this aspect of our work has been wonderful in terms of informing us, also be thinking about their own students' own experiences when it has come to what schools have been doing in support of them and during the pandemic, and what we need to continue to do in support of our students ongoing. And part of that has been highlighting student artwork, as we mentioned earlier, and being able for students to be able to express themselves in a variety of different contexts, be able to, and different ways. And as you heard earlier, the amount of artwork being developed by students has absolutely just, it's really exploded. We have so much, students are developing so much of their creativity and their expression, and that has been absolutely wonderful. And we think that that also has been an important part of their ability to heal and to process what they've experienced. And so we're so grateful to our teachers for working with our students and being able to help them present and develop their artwork. I'd like to welcome a young woman who is a recent graduate from our schools, Carmen Asmitia. Carmen spoke at our Equity Summit in January, and is here to talk to us a little bit about her experience and what it was that helped her get through this challenging year and the things that she has been able to overcome. And so I'd like to welcome Carmen. Thank you so much for joining us and speaking with us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Spa. I really appreciate that. As he mentioned, my name is Carmen Asmitia. I just graduated from Harbor High School. And I think it's very important that we're having a conversation reflecting on the successes and the downfalls of the last year and a half, roughly 2 years. These past months have been incredibly informative regarding who students are as individuals and who we are as parts of our community. I truly believe that we all underestimated the reality of life, let alone student life, during a global pandemic. And although, as Ferris has mentioned, the limitations on the financial resources that have been provided, it's still been incredibly evident that the school officials, the principals, the teachers, the staff in Santa Cruz County, I can say honestly and morally understand the importance of community and providing resources, making sure that every student is receiving an equal education. As a student, one of the biggest takeaways from these past 2 years is really understanding that and that dedication that teachers and people like yourselves have towards students. I have attended Pacific Collegiate, Santa Cruz High School, and like I mentioned, I just graduated from Harbor High School. My sister has attended Good Shepherd, and I have many friends at Soquel and Aptos and Oasis and Costa Noa. And I've noticed that regardless of where you went in Santa Cruz County these past year and a half, regardless of whether or not you consider yourself to be an introvert or an extrovert, it's been clear sort of this common theme of just a lack of motivation, not just towards education, but sadly towards further endeavors beyond K through 12. And unfortunately, these struggles made it easier for students that kind of have these little verbal protests and have little conversations along the lines, you know, why should I care when Shakespeare was born? When am I ever going to use this math? You know, to an extent, these are relatively common conversations amongst youth. However, as a result of the pandemic, these verbal protests just snowballed into conversations along the lines, well, I'm not in a classroom physically, so I'm going to turn off my camera and go to sleep, or I'm gonna go ahead and join Zoom, but I'm gonna go to work at the same time. And these sort of nonchalant, you know, I don't care type of vibes and energy really made for a year and a half of not retaining, not comprehending, just submitting assignments and tests and quizzes on time became more important than understanding the content of what you're submitting, of what you should have read, what you should have reviewed instead of, these SparkNotes easy approaches. On a positive note, however, I've noticed that as an approach to combat these sort of small yet detrimental protests is that the staff in Santa Cruz has just double, triple, just extended their sort of verbal investments regarding the well-being of their students. And by this, I mean, it's easy to lose hope in graduating or in attending school when you feel distant from a support system. However, this year, I've begun to hear conversations like, oh, I've heard you talking about this school. I graduated from there. Let's have a conversation about my experience. Or teachers or staff saying, remember when you said you wanted to become a scientist? Well, I minored in chemistry, or so-and-so minored in this or majored in that. And so you should go and have a conversation with them. And so in having teachers and staff who make it dramatically evident that they want to see you thrive, and coaches who want to see you succeed, and school counselors who hold you to expectations, and principals who genuinely want to see you graduate, just became game changers for a lot of students during the pandemic. Now, aside from individuals, resources like hotspots and take-home lunches and providing everybody with a Chromebook is something that I personally think that Santa Cruz County did not receive enough credit for. I'm aware that some of these resources, of course, were applicable before the pandemic. However, when you kind of had schools put their foots down and say, you know what, today, this day, this time, I need seniors to grab Chromebooks. I need sophomores to grab hotspots. I need freshmen to grab lunch, and then switch days. Schools begin to eliminate the understandable pride that a lot of hardworking students who just aren't comfortable receiving help have, which overall allowed for realistic distant learning situations. And, the last thing I'd like to say is that everyone here is an individual. You all have experienced a tremendous amount of things these past 2 years. Some of you lost loved ones. Some of you lost your homes. Some of you spilled coffee this morning or got cut off in traffic. And yet, despite everything that has been going on personally in each and every one of your lives, whether you are a teacher, whether you work for the county, whether you participate in the community, whether you are a student, whether you have just graduated, or whether you are going to begin to attend, I think, like I mentioned before, it's important that all of you have put those things aside. And it's not just about understanding the relevance of having conversations like the one that we're having right now, but it's the actions of having conversations. It's the actions of having speakers and having presentations that I think, again, just reinforces the fact that you all honestly care about the students and the staff, which is the reason why myself and many students, I'm going to say, successfully ended the school year. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmen. You are an inspiration to us all, and thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your story. Carmen, could you tell us what your plans are after now that you've graduated from high school?
Of course, I would love to. So I'm currently going to go ahead and attend Cabrillo College, which I'm super excited about. I'm hoping to then attend a 4-year university and graduate as a licensed, well, not a licensed yet, but a behavioral therapist. And I'm hoping to just, give back to my community, and eventually, which I don't like, but there's an age limit on becoming president of the United States of America. So once I have reached that age, then of course I will become the first female African-American president of the United States. And I promise I will come back to Santa Cruz and I will continue to have positive conversations, and I will go ahead and just try and give back as much as I can, whether it's having a little conversation like this or whether it's finding funding for not just Santa Cruz, but all counties, And so, yeah, I'm hoping those are my plans.
Carmen, thank you so much for you're absolutely amazing. I think you just got a bunch of votes already for your campaign for when it's time. Please know that you have the appreciation of everybody. Your words are so inspiring, and I almost feel like it was we had discussed you becoming a behavioral health therapist. I think that is absolutely perfect. And I think you'd be amazing at it. I think you'd be amazing at anything that you set your mind to. So congratulations on your graduation. Thank you for coming to speak with us. I think you are going to continue shaking things up everywhere you go. And it's been wonderful getting to know you a little bit over the last few months. Congratulations, Carmen. And so if you do want to share a few, some folks are already sending kind of shout outs to Carmen for if you want to put it into the chat. Again, please make sure it says panelists and attendees so that Carmen can see your words of support for her political campaign. I'm sure she's going to be fundraising soon. Would like to keep the conversation going as we look forward, because who better than Carmen to remind us what this is all about, what the future holds, because it is so very, very exciting. To be able to continue working on thinking about where our schools are going and where they're headed, and how we can continue to connect with, inspire, and learn from young people like Carmen as part of the educational process. We are planning, as you have heard, for the full reopening of our schools in the fall. And we are going to continue our efforts when it comes to digital equity and access for all students. We want 100% of our students to have broadband internet connectivity, not just with a hotspot, but broadband speeds. We see it as a lifeline for families and students. We're going to continue to invest the resources that we've gotten from the state and continue advocating for ongoing resources for all our students. We recognize that we have amazingly resilient students in schools, and we have to continue to provide support throughout this for the next phase of the pandemic. We are currently waiting on updated guidance for schools in the fall, and there is a misconception out there that once we get to June 15th, which is tomorrow, that a bunch of the restrictions and a bunch of things are just going to kind of disappear, and that's not the case. The California Department of Public Health is going to be issuing new guidance for schools about how we're able to implement our schools in the fall. And we're waiting for that guidance, and we'll be sharing that information as soon as we get it. But we also have a lot of questions about it. And because certain, people have concerns about different aspects, such as face coverings and masking, distancing, and other components of the California Department of Public Health, which we are mandated to be following, will establish. We're also going to be welcoming new superintendents who are going to be joining us in the fall. 4 amazing superintendents are retiring after a career, an amazing career in education. Diane Morgenstern from Mountain. We have Michelle McKinney from Happy Valley. Lori Bruton from San Lorenzo Valley, and Lori Chamberlain from Live Oak. 4 people who I have been so fortunate to work with and have to learn from, to work side by side. And they are leaving us after almost 100 years together of commitment to education. And they will. We have 4 new superintendents who will be joining us, and we look forward to working with them and continuing the great partnerships that we have developed. And we will continue to move forward as a community in education. And those partnerships don't only include, of course, our school districts. Those partnerships, of course, include such a wide range of agencies and organizations that we talked about today. And we're excited about how we're going to continue to partner together to be able to wrap our students with as much support and services as they deserve, to be able to ensure that we dismantle and disrupt those inequitable practices and give students every opportunity to be successful, to achieve their dreams, and to achieve wellness for themselves and sustainability for their families. It has been so exciting to share a little bit of the efforts, how we have partnered together to overcome one of the biggest challenges that has ever been seen in our community and in education, and how we'll continue to partner together and in support of each other over the next in this next phase that we're entering and in the near future. We have a few minutes that we're going to be to take some questions. If you have any questions you'd like to ask of us. And so we're going to ask you to use the Q&A feature, and I'm going to ask Debbie or any of our folks who are monitoring our Q&A component, if there are any questions that we could answer before we close out the night tonight.
Hi, Ferris. So far, I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So there were a few questions in the initial registration, but I think most of them have been answered through the presentation about social emotional learning, cultural intelligence, and again, how we're supporting mental health support or using our COVID and surplus monies for mental health support. So I don't see anything else other than those. And I think we've answered those in the presentation.
Wonderful. I want to thank everybody for participating. A big shout out also to Debbie Bodenheimer, who helped design and organize this presentation tonight, and to all our panelists who spoke. This has been really a pleasure to share some information with you. It is part of our ongoing effort to be able to be as transparent as possible from when it comes to data, when it comes to stories, connecting with the whole school community, and really highlighting a lot of the positives, because many times what gets put out there are kind of the negative aspects, and we have to be real with those negative aspects, and we need to face those challenges that we're facing, but also we need to highlight the successes and the achievements of our students, of their families, and of our staff. It has really been a pleasure to share the space with you, to be able to participate and talk to you a little bit about about the challenges that we face and how we will continue to work to overcome them. I want to thank everybody at the County Office of Education, all the district superintendents. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and a big shout out to Carmen Azmitia, who is going to be the first African-American woman president of the United States. So we hear. Wendy Barron, thank you so much for your keynote address. Jason, Michael, Debbie, everybody who participated tonight. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.